Allen's Investigate. The Allen's Investigate, airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans. Yay, and welcome to the Allen's Investigate with me, Shona Allen.
And I'm Gary Allen, the Cockney Bard.
We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from New Orleans, and also on Roku. Now, this week, we'd like to welcome a very special guest, Lorilei Potvin, fabulous Canadian clairvoyant medium, spiritual teacher, and fellow podcaster on the United Public Radio Network. Lorilei is very knowledgeable about the paranormal, having lived in an extremely haunted home for 11 plus years. She shared her story on the Travel Channel's Paranormal Survivor. She's also an energy healer, Akashic Records practitioner, medical intuitive, and registered nurse. Welcome, Lorilei.
Welcome, Lorilei.
Thank you for having me. And I know I hope they didn't see the first part of the intro. I have a sticky button on my computer. I think
Sticky button. Oh.
Well, there's nothing worse than a sticky button.
You'll have to get some WD-40 for that, won't you?
You look gorgeous, darling. You look
They gotta
gorgeous.
have a touch screen.
Yeah.
How are you, Lorilei?
I'm great. Thank you.
Good.
It's
Brilliant.
actually almost 2 p.m. where I am. I live in Ontario,
Wow.
Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're in the evening. It's just gone 7 o'clock
Yeah,
here.
just on 7 o'clock here in the UK.
Your
UK.
bedtime soon, won't it, Gary?
Yes, I think
How are
fun.
you guys? We don't always talk before the show, even though being on the same network, we've got so many different shows and hosts on the show. But
Oh,
we
yeah.
become
Yeah.
friends.
Yeah, well, we was looking at Roku a bit earlier, and it's great on there.
Yeah, it's really good, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got loads of different channels. So we managed to navigate our way to the United Public Radio Network's channel on there. And it's brilliant. You've got all your shows on there and our shows, and it's brilliant.
Yeah.
But I tell people though, because I didn't know much about Roku. I do have an account and we've got a Fire Stick. But what I always tell them on my shows, because it took forever to kind of try and find it. And then somebody said,
Yeah.
well, don't you have a channel code? And I said, no. And then what I found the easiest I tell people is log into your Roku. Then you're going to go to the channel store and you're going to look up UFO space P as in paranormal. And then a list comes up. I think we're about third or fourth down. And I always tell them you're looking for UFO space paranormal and United Public Radio. And then they can find us really easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So it's brilliant.
super. Yeah.
Well, I thought we'd start off by asking you basically to tell you a little bit about yourself, because I'm guessing that there'll be lots of people that perhaps don't watch your show and haven't yet, and I hope that they will after this as well. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
tell us a bit about yourself, darling.
Excuse me. Okay, I'm a Canadian clairvoyant medium, like you said, a crystal Reiki energy healer, Akashic Records practitioner, spiritual teacher and mentor, registered nurse, and I am a host on this network, on United Public Radio Network. I've been here almost 4 years, so I have my own solo show on Monday nights, which is from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that would be 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. British Standard Time. Now, the beautiful thing is all our shows are archived, so there's always replays. And I will let your audience know I have a ton of people from UK coming on very soon. I'm booking them now. And then I have a second show. It's one of our newer shows, and it's on Thursday nights called The Thing at the Foot of the Bed with my amazing friend and co-host, David Hansel. He is also a medium, angel channel. We both have had near-death experiences, paranormal experiences, and we find that people send us a lot of questions, like what happens when you die? Are angels real? Are guides real? What's a demon? Even they ask us things like that. And so we thought, why don't we do a show about this? So we're very interactive with our audience, and we have people chit chat about it and what have you.
Lovely. Well, that's really good, because I think there's a definite need for people's questions to be answered, because I think people are really searching at the moment to find answers.
Yeah.
You know, I think more people now are experiencing things that they can't really explain, and they do need some help with that. So I think that's a brilliant idea.
And there is an awful lot of rubbish spoken about it, isn't there? You know, so
Well,
it's good to clarify it and get people to sort. I mean, we can only explain as much as we can that we can possibly know, but at least it gives people a better idea, doesn't it? Than you know, they read it in books or they look on the net, but from personal experience, that's the best one you can advertise, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, everybody has a camera now, so we're catching a lot of stuff on camera that we weren't catching. There's also a lot of deep fakes out there. I forgot to mention with the Angel Rock, what I do also is I have people from all aspects of life. You could be spiritual, could be paranormal, could be even, I do a bit of truth seeking. And what I do, the people that I have on, either professionally or extracurricularly, they're making a positive change for humanity. So it's a conversation again. And I think, like you said, people are wanting to talk about these things. They're seeing things like on the internet, on YouTube, on, forums, on TikTok, you name it. And they want to know, is this real? What does this mean? What did this experience mean? Why am I going through this? Exactly what you said, Shona, too.
Yeah, but it's very difficult with CGI now because it's almost impossible to tell truth from fiction, isn't it?
The deep fakes out there, yes. And for example, I had somebody, and I'm very cognizant of not saying to people, you're faking it, because when my partner Dell and I went through the experience that we did in our previous home, he was thrown, I know we talk meters, but I'll say 15 feet. It was about 15 feet across the kitchen. There was nothing there. We've been bitten, we've been burnt, we've been scratched. There was crazy things. I'm actually writing a book about our experience.
Right.
And
Brilliant.
I always say we didn't look for this. I was never looking for the paranormal. It found us. And I wanted answers. I wanted explanations. But what you're talking very quickly with the deep fakes, I had somebody send me a video, and right away when I watched it, it was supposedly from a Ring camera that an acquaintance had caught. There was a cut in the video. And then I looked, there were things missing from each video, and the person swears there was no cut in the video. No, I wasn't there. But we have to go with what we see and what we can debunk, right? And I think we have to do that nowadays with what's happening.
Right. Well, I think so. I think it's really important, and it's frustrated me for years because you see these things on YouTube and the various channels, and you think to yourself, that's definitely been faked, and it frustrates the life out of me because it puts research years back. Because for all the genuine ones, when people see all these fakes, they're going to think it's all fake, and it isn't.
That's the problem
genuine.
with TV shows, isn't it? I mean, it's harder to produce a TV show if you don't have some fakery in it, some throwing of keys or a throwing of a stone or something. But it's such a shame that they feel the need that they have to do that, because it does. As we know that there is some amazing things, and I can remember a story where I was doing explaining to someone. It was a group of people there, and there was a girl and a bloke, and he was about 6'4", and I was explaining something. Anyway, in my head, I could hear he's taking the piss. Excuse my French.
I know what it means.
Yeah, but I could hear him saying that he's doing, he's inside, he's laughing at you, you see. So I thought, right. So the next minute, he ends up falling down like a tree, laying on the floor, holding his chest.
I have seen videos like that.
Yeah. And basically the spirit world was saying to me, that will teach him a lesson.
Well, we're all intuitive, all three of us. So we, and I like to teach when I'm teaching or mentoring or on podcasts or what, we all have these abilities, I always say. And whether you're a natural born leader or athlete or musician, like the beautiful singing voice Shona has, or things like that, right? But it doesn't mean that we can't tap into or learn. And I think we are all naturally gifted.
Yeah, I do
with
too.
these
Yeah.
abilities. People just have never been taught to recognize that. But we've heard this saying, I don't know how much you use it over there, but we'll say, I'm following my gut, or I trust my gut.
Yeah.
That's your
sure.
intuitive nature, right?
Yeah, you got instinct, of course.
That's
And
right.
that's the point, is that, you know, I've always said this, and Shona's always said this, that everybody on the planet, whether they're the biggest skeptic in the world or the biggest believer in the world, you have a sixth sense, and you also have healing powers, the powers to heal with your hands. So
Absolutely.
we've always said that. Absolutely. That's everybody. There's no one, it doesn't matter whether you're deeply religious or you're not.
Well,
you have it.
Exactly. And I think if people actually research back into some of the wisdom and quotations of many different cultures, ranging from the ancient Egyptian to on the Haran temple, the Vedic texts as well, the Upanishads, for example, they'll realize that actually they tell you exactly that in those texts.
Well, you know, I always say, even coming from a big pharma background, and I am a registered nurse. I'm not able to actively work anymore. I injured my back. I use my medical stuff every day. But what I was going to say is, with the background that I came from, I always look to, and this is not medical advice, I want to make that clear. I'm sharing what I do personally. I think everybody hearing this, just to make it clear, you have to do what feels right for you. But for my own family and myself, I look for something natural, because hey, we wouldn't be here today if the people way back, like many of the names you mentioned, hadn't figured it all out, figured out what works, what heals, what doesn't, and so on.
Well, it's such a shame. It's such a shame that there's a lot of plants and herbs and everything which work perfectly fine, and of course, big pharma is trying to stop that, and trying to outlaw them. And it's all for money, isn't it? I mean, there wasn't no drugs in there wasn't no pharmaceutical drugs in the olden days, was there? So there weren't no chemists.
I think that they were based on things, but the reason why, and I should clarify too, obviously, if anybody in my family was in acute danger or it was life-threatening, of course, I would go to a hospital. But my point is that with a little bit of research, and I don't recommend somebody just Google it and look, like you really do have to do some research. My sister-in-law is a naturopathic doctor, has gone to college and university for 7 or 9 years. So she's a resource if I do need her. But I've always kind of thought that way and always looked at it. I really believe in one of my past lives that I was probably a witch, because I can walk in anywhere. Even when I was a nurse, especially working in the community, worked solo, and you'd go to people's homes, I would look at a wound. I can remember one time, and I'm not saying this to brag, because I think we do have these intuitive abilities. I walked in and this lady had this wound on right at the back of her back. And at that time, I didn't realize I was connected to spirit and my guides. And I walked in and looked at it and went, and the woman said, "What?" I said, "Oh, nothing." And I said, I'm just going to call the doctor. And I called the doctor, and thank goodness he was a kind man and he was willing to listen. And I said, "Listen, I'm not trying to diagnose, but this is definitely skin cancer. I am telling you, I swear." And he goes, "Oh my goodness, I never thought of it." It was a wound that wasn't healing. And sure enough, he went in and did a biopsy. Or she went in and had a biopsy done, and it was skin cancer.
It's very well. That's what I'm saying. You go by your gut feeling, don't you? I mean,
I heard it. Like I literally heard, and now I know it was my guides. And no, I don't hear voices. For those that connect with that, we all have guides and angels. I always say, whether you believe in them, they believe in you, and they're there.
I think this is the point. That there's so many people all over the world who don't. Some people, they don't believe in it. They think it's all a load of nonsense or whatever. But
and that's okay. That's their journey.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. But the point of it is, if you've got to search for the truth, you can't just say it's a load of rubbish or it don't exist, can you?
No, exactly. Just because a skeptic or someone on television has said it is, you have to actually search a little bit more deeply than that.
Yeah, and I always the way I always look at it, I say, like, look at all these great philosophers and these great artists and writers and everything, and they all believed in it. So if they believed in it, why shouldn't you believe in it? That's the point, isn't it? I mean, you know, because some skeptic says, well, it don't exist, or someone who's never researched anything in their life says, oh, it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, does it? But they should at least keep an open mind and go searching for it.
Yeah, but it doesn't exist because in their mind, right? I'm not going to look for it because it doesn't exist. And we can never convince people what to believe.
No.
And, you know, that's okay if that's how you want to live your life. But I do believe, especially in this day and age, like look at even TV. When we were on Paranormal Survivor, for example, I'm not saying what I'm saying to sound ungrateful in any way. I'm deeply grateful for the experience. It's allowed me to meet many great people like yourselves and do what I'm doing. But I can tell you that it did not happen the way they showed it. Everything that my partner and I said on the episode, and interestingly enough, I'm going to give her a little shout out because she does a lot of work for the network and has great shows. Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano with The Outer Realm on Wednesdays and Thursdays. I did not know Michelle when we filmed the episode, but she is actually one of the experts that comments on the episode at the time. So it really is a small world.
Yes.
But what I was going to say is reality TV is not real. The only thing that happened true to nature, I will say, is the last part of the episode. That would be about, we had no say in the way they did it. We gave them their story, and I understand they only have so much time and what they had to tell, and the amount of time to tell it, but it did not happen quite the way.
Well, it's very difficult if you haven't got the editing power to do the editing. Then there can be lots of problems with that.
People believe it. Like, honestly, I've only, probably it was a couple years back, and I was looking for a link. Somebody wanted a link to the show. And so I was looking and I found it. And there was all these comments. I thought, oh gosh, I should just take a look. You would not believe the comments that were in there. Like anywhere from religious condemnation to the reason this happened because Dell and I weren't married and we were living in sin, and like all these things. Like people really believed what they saw, and that's a little bit scary in a way because I guess I don't know, like if you're believing what's on TV, I think we do have to question, like you said.
Definitely, you have to take it with a pinch of salt, and I would include some of the news programs on that as well. Actually,
well, we had a great one. We had a great one.
I was just going to add quickly. I always tell people, you don't have to believe what I say, but if anything, you know, it resonates, or you've got some questions or some niggling, whatever you do about it, go look for yourself. Take a look for yourself.
Yeah, to research. I mean, we had a program. I don't think it's running anymore. It might still be anyway. But there's a program called Most Haunted, and there was an hilarious.
I know, I've seen it. Yeah.
Have you seen it? Yeah. Well, there was a medium called Derek Akora, and he was really well known in the UK. He's dead now. But anyway, he had this scene where they were searching for Dick Turpin. Okay.
You know, the highwayman.
You know, the highwayman. Have you ever heard of Dick Turpin?
I have heard the name.
And then all of a sudden, Derek Akora, he gets this voice. And what is it? You tell it, Shona. What is it?
God must I?
Oh, all right then. You won't go on. It's funny the way you say it, yeah.
But he says, I'm getting something, Sam. Mary loves Dick.
Mary loves Dick. Now, I'm sure she did. But
he said, Mary's awfully fond of Dick.
Mary's awfully fond of Dick. Now,
so I'm sure that was set up that way.
Yeah, I mean, you have to say that. You have to say that this sounds very set up. But the problem is, you know, everybody watching that would think the same thing. You know, you'd think it was set up. And you know, when I've been on programs and that, I would never ever go down to doing anything like that. Even if they ask me, I'll tell them no, because it's about, to me, it's all about truth. You know, it's all about bringing people the truth. I could never, ever do anything like that, even if it's for £1 million just for a show. Couldn't do it.
I wouldn't either. Like, I was having a chat with my co-host Dave, and I love Dave. I met him years ago in a group. We always say, we shall remain nameless. It didn't end up great in the end, but the beautiful things that came out of it. I've got some wonderful friends. One of them's coming on Monday night on the Angel Rock, Leanne. And So I was talking to Dave about this, and he had somebody. I won't give too many details away, but somebody had messaged him and asked him for coordinates of where their loved one was. Their loved one, very sadly, was no longer with us, and the life, I think, was taken, and they didn't know by whom, nor could they find their body. And David said, "Listen, I don't do that kind of stuff. I work through authorities." And so what they had decided instead, I guess, was to email him, because he will do some email readings. And he shared with the answer he had given her, which I thought was very beautiful. To me, he did give her some information, but he couldn't answer her question specifically. So what he did was he sent her money back. And I would do the same thing. And I think that we have to do this kind of thing because there's so much skepticism in the world about the paranormal, truth seeking, topics that aren't normal mainstream that you will see, say, on TV, or they're shown with a very skeptical eye. So that's why, Shona, you had said this earlier in the show, when people fake things, and it's not from an elitist point of view, but it really, really undermines people that are really trying to do the right thing and show the truth.
Yeah, for sure. It's a big problem, and of course, with TV producers and all that, they want to see, some action on there. You can't have a program where nothing actually happens.
No, I mean, from a TV's point of view, it's all about entertainment, isn't it?
And money, isn't it? Yeah. As well, it's all about money.
You know what happens though, and I'm glad that they feel they can reach out to somebody, but from time to time, it seems like when certain, say, paranormal shows are on, and you get people that are very awful to spirits. Again, I hate quotation marks, I keep doing that, but spirits, and you'll see it on TV, right? They're provoking, if you will. And then I always find I tend to get these gentlemen in their maybe 18 to 22-year-old range that maybe have been a bit of a loner and really want to belong, and they start watching these shows. So instead of trying to join up with somebody that's done this for a while, can teach them maybe how to use equipment, what you can do, what you can't do, they'll mimic what they see on TV. They'll go to some of these really well-known haunted locations they've seen on TV. And I can think of one in particular. He went there on his own, and he took something from the site and brought it home, and all heck broke loose at his house. And then he's looking for help. We were able to help him, but the sad part is, like I said, a lot of people believe this stuff is real. It is real, but not the way we're seeing it on TV.
No, exactly. And there is an interesting thing with and I think you can explain it to the listening public and the watching public as well, is that there is two sides of it. Let's just say a spirit world, for want of a better word, that there's two sides. There is a good and there is a dark side. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. And some people, spiritualists or whatever, they just seem to believe that it's all love and light and all flowers and that's it. But it simply is not. It simply is not. From my experience, and I've had 30 years experience of it, and I can tell you that there is good and some of the wonderful writings that have come through me, beautiful love poems or whatever it is, and poems about. Now that is a wonderful side. That's a good side, isn't it? And love and everything. And there's also a negative side that you really need to be able to sort the wheat from the chaff. And if you start playing in the playground of the negative side, there is a dark side there. There's no question.
Well, the way I explain it years ago, and I won't get into it today, but one of these days, maybe we come back on, you guys come on my show, remind me, I'll talk about, but I always say, what do tattoos and angel cards have to do with each other? Nothing, but it was an introduction through a bit of a story to angel cards, and I was very drawn to them. And then I had gone through my divorce with my first husband. I've known Del my whole life, and we were friends. And I remember saying to him, I'm only working with angel cards because they're positive. There's nothing negative. I want nothing to do with the negative. And I still remember this years later. He said to me, Laura, in order to work in the light, you're going to have to know the difference between what is dark and what is light. And he was right. But if we break this down, if everything is energy, which I believe it is, and one of the laws of energy is, it can either be created nor destroyed, but transferred from one place to another. That means we are energy. And what people don't recognize is how incredibly, incredibly powerful our thoughts, our words, and our emotions are. So every thought that we have, and if people don't believe that, take a look at our world. Besides nature, everything that is on this planet has either been thought up, dreamed up, channeled, designed, created, manufactured. It's come from us. We are powerful. We're manifestors. But we also have people that always don't have positive, wonderful, amazing thoughts and evil things. There are things like that.
Well, just look at the simple thing of in nature. You've got the cat that torments the hell out of the mouse for fun, okay, and then it may kill it, it may not, but it will do some damage. And then you've got the fox who kills the beautiful rabbit, who's so wonderful and harmless and everything. And you think to yourself, like the fox, ripping the rabbit to pieces, and you think, what the hell is that all about? And that's just two simple examples of nature, and obviously the weather and everything else. How you get a good, a positive, and you get a negative.
Well, I think on this planet that we live in a duality. So when we have light, we have dark, we have cold, we have hot. Now, getting into animals, really, and I mean, we could have done a whole show just on this whole topic, but, one thing I will say about nature, that it doesn't have the nature of man. It doesn't take more than what it needs to eat.
No, that's
and so, but getting back to the energy perspective, right? And I've tried to figure this out, and it doesn't mean that I'm right. For wherever this comes from, these negative things, I do believe there is something that people call demonic entities. There are things that are evil. There are things that are powerful. And you look back, the way I always say this is, if it didn't matter or it didn't exist, we wouldn't be hearing about it today. You guys were, I think it was Shona, you were saying you were talking going back in history, looking through the ages. Some of these things that we hear about, dragons, giants, demons, things like this, they didn't exist long before TV and radio. How did people entertain themselves? Right? Sit around the fire, and the elder would sit and tell stories, and we pass the story down from generation to generation. I believe there has to be some truth to that. So yes, I think we will always have negative entities. Took me a long time to wrap my mind around, and this may offend some people, and I apologize if it does, and it's just my belief. There isn't a hell. And it took me a long time to reconcile that, coming from a Catholic background. And where's the retribution for people that do really awful things? And it took me a long time to unravel that with spirit.
Well, if there is a hell, it's probably here.
With that?
Yeah, Shakespeare mentions that, doesn't he? Yeah, Shakespeare mentions that. So it's quite interesting. But I totally agree with you, Lorilei, that I came to the same conclusion years ago too, that I think the only hell that we create is the hell that man has created for himself.
We do live in paradise, don't we? We live in paradise.
Well, you get into near-death experiences. Like I believe I've had one as a toddler, and I've studied them professionally as well as personally for just over 40 years. I don't have all the answers. But very rarely, it's not always, thank goodness, but you will hear of somebody that's had a hellish experience as a near-death experience. I have a theory about that. Don't know if it's true or not. I always say we're not going to know all the answers till we go back home ourselves. That's what I call it, home.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. And I mean, there are some very unusual experiences of people, because I know my own grandfather died on the operating table, and the surgeon said to him, did you have any experiences? Because the surgeon was quite interested in that.
He's very open-minded to have asked that.
He was. This is quite some years ago as well. And my granddad said, no. He said, really, he said, all I saw was just blackness. He said, but what I did see, and now this is probably quite scary to some, he said, I saw a grinning skull. So that was his experience. Now, my grandfather was a Catholic, and so his belief system was that there wasn't anything. That's
okay, so let's talk about that for a sec. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry, finish your thought. I apologize. I got excited.
Okay, you carry on.
So my theory, and I'm not a doctor, but just with medical knowledge and how the human body works, and looking at these stories and really kind of trying to take them apart, if you will. I have a theory that if your heart hasn't completely stopped, I have seen people that have had one heartbeat like every 45 seconds or take a breath after 4 minutes, or you know what I mean? They're not completely gone from the body. Not completely. There's all these realms there is. And I think that when we pass, we immediately just pass right straight through very quickly. But say you haven't completely stopped breathing, living, whatever that may be. You can still be considered, I guess, clinically dead because it looks like there's no heartbeat and then a little blip and then, right? What if we got stuck in those lower realms? That because we hadn't completely, the heart and the breathing stopped. It's just a thought. It's just a theory. I don't know. But
no, it's an interesting one. My mother also had quite an interesting one as well. When we moved house, we moved into this really, really old Victorian house that belonged to my great uncle, and it had no heating. It was by the sea, and in England, you can imagine it's not like Florida. It was freezing, absolutely freezing,
and damp, I'm sure.
And damp, exactly. And so my poor mum, she went on to develop bronchial asthma, and she developed bronchial pneumonia, and she was extremely ill. And she was upstairs in bed, and she told me this was kind of like a crisis point, I think, because she said when she woke up, I've seen the angel of death. And I said, what do you mean, Mum? Because I was just a child at the time. And she said, I saw this bat-like creature. It was like a half man, half bat coming towards me with its wings outstretched. She said, and just at the last minute, it folded them like that and then disappeared. She woke up, and that's when she started to get better and recover after that. So that was really quite a frightening experience for my mum, actually.
Was she an adult when this happened, or as a child?
Yes. No, she was an adult. Yeah.
Okay. Because the other thing I didn't mention, we then have religious dogma and beliefs that people believe what might await them. And then you get into why we actually have, I believe, earthbound spirits. And there's so many reasons why we could have earthbound spirits. People thinking what they've done in life, they haven't been a good person, they're going to go to hell, so they don't leave. And I also think that can also play into sometimes near-death experiences as well.
It's very
interesting story with your mom. I haven't heard one like that yet. That is
they really did quite scare her, but it was interesting that it was actually after she had that experience that it was almost like a crisis point, and she started to get better and recover after that. So I think that was really interesting.
There is a doctor in England called Dr. Peter Fenwick, and he was very much into that, wasn't he, Dr. Peter Fenwick?
Well, I think he was studying.
I think he still
is,
studying it, for a long time.
I think that was at the Maudsley Hospital, was
at
it?
The Maudsley Hospital, and I think he's had some got some wonderful experiences to tell people as well,
But it's really interesting. But Lorilei, I was going to ask you, when did you first sort of discover that you had these abilities, though?
Okay. I think I've always had these abilities. And so both my parents, now my mother, who does not believe in any of this stuff and would make fun of people that do what I do. There is a study. I know the owner of our network, Joe Montaldo, who's been one of the bigger members and starting members of a thing called International Center for Alien Research. I know he's shared over the years. He's been doing a 20-year study at least of people that have there's a reason why I'm telling you this, Rh negative blood, red hair, and green eyes, because it didn't exist in our genome, if you will, like our makeup before 70. Yeah, before it showed up about 70,000 years ago. Before that, it didn't exist. My mother has red hair, green eyes, and Rh negative blood. And then you get into my dad's side, good French Canadian Catholic family. Apparently my grandmother, Shona, you're going to do exactly probably what I'm going to do every time I say it, was pregnant every year for 25 years and ended up with 17 children.
My goodness. Wow.
So my dad was towards the middle end, as he told the story. His third eldest child wasn't home for dinner. And as he told it to me growing up, he would have been about 12. My grandmother was from Belgium, and her name was Blondine. And I guess he reports it that she stood up, I think it was like 6:03 p.m. And she says, oh my gosh, and gave my uncle's name, said, he's not home. He's dead. He's dead. He's dead. And was like yelling. And my grandfather, very thick French Canadian accent, is going, sit down, Blondine, sit down. You're being ridiculous. He's just late for dinner. Now, this would have been in the early 50s, no, probably about mid 50s. And I guess an hour and a half later, he shows up at the door and knocks on the door, but the police, to tell them, I guess my uncle and his best friend were hot rodding with homemade, basically fixed up cars, no seatbelts. My uncle was going first, and the door opened, and he fell out, and his best friend ran him over at 6:03 p.m.
No.
So I have a history. So I always knew things, and I didn't know why I knew them. My first paranormal experience, remembering I was barely 4 years old, when I was 8. From the time we had moved into a new home and it had been built, nobody had lived in it. From the time the snow melted until it fell again, so about 6 months, I woke up every night at 3:00, completely blue and unable to breathe. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. There was I know you guys don't have 911 over there, but your emergency number you'd call, we didn't have that back then. And my father would scoop me up. Lots of times I would pass out and I wasn't being choked. It wasn't an asthma attack. They diagnosed me with asthma. Long story short, he would scoop me up, put me in the car, start driving to emergency. I'd start breathing again. Never found out why this happened. Because it's never happened again. I always say knock on wood. And then I always knew things working as a nurse, whether it was in critical care. I worked in the NICU, or especially on one of the floors. Usually the new grads would work the night shift. So I'd work with somebody I'd graduated with from university. We'd have about 60 patients each. And I'm telling you, there are so many times I just intuitively knew. I'd walk into a room, I'd see something, and what have you. Even when after the experience we went through, and I started learning, because I wanted to know what the heck is going on. Like, why are we having, and it was severe paranormal experiences. I started realizing, holy cow, I've got that. No, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. So I started looking and working with mentors and what have you, and realized this gift has always been here. I've always been using it. I just haven't been actively using it. And lastly, my best friend, who I lived with and had known since the age of 16, and we lived together for quite a few years before we both got married. And I didn't know what I was going to say to her about what I'm doing now. And when I told her, she was so matter of fact. She goes, I'm not surprised at all. And I said, what? And she goes, Laura, when we lived together, you would know things. I would have no clue how you would know. You would just know, excuse me, and it would turn out to be right. She goes, I just would never, ever question it because it was right. And I'm not always right. I don't mean that, but those were her words.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
You
As a nurse, sorry, Shona, as a nurse, what do you think about people hearing voices? I mean, because it's quite interesting that when some people with schizophrenia,
you're bringing up a topic I talk about.
Yeah, but it's quite interesting when you hear it in the news and they say, "Oh, I heard voices and I stab someone to death or shoot someone or whatever." It's quite interesting because quite clearly, I hear voices, and these voices give me the poetry or philosophy or whatever. And they don't tell me to go and kill anybody, but clearly there is a thought process there, which is the same. These people say they're hearing voices, but what's your view of that?
Okay, so looking back, and I do have schizophrenia on my dad's side, one uncle. Do I believe he's truly schizophrenic? And again, I can't diagnose. Yes, I do. I mean, from what I've seen, what I've experienced with him, including being at my grandmother's house as a teenager, and my grandmother was not a pleasant person. I can't blame her. Like I say, with 17 children, but she had told me to go make tea, and my father was there with me, and I heard him yell my uncle's name and say, "Get away from her." My uncle was behind me with his hands. He was going to choke me. It's because he was ill. Like he wasn't
No,
evil.
yeah.
But so I've looked back at many cases over the years when I would look after people with schizophrenia, and I can tell you, for those that don't know what schizophrenia is, and I'm sure people have heard it, it's a mental illness that can cause hallucinations, hearing voices, and what have you. You need to be medicated. Usually, it's very difficult sometimes to find a good combination. And a lot of people I have experienced, at least over here in Canada, and I have to say in North America, these are the people that we may see homeless, because it's almost a cycle, because they'll start taking their medication, they'll feel great, they'll feel wonderful, and they stop taking the medication. And not everybody with schizophrenia does this. I want to point that out. But a lot of times that's what happens. So people that are hearing voices, and it's very sad because I have run into a lot of psychics and mediums who indeed are not mentally ill or schizophrenic. One in particular recently is very close to me, has been going through this, and I truly believe they are a medium. They can see spirit, they can hear it. I've had this conversation with my partner, Dal, because we have it on both sides of our family. We've seen it, whether it's a second or third cousin. Like I know, for example, I heard one gentleman who was riding around on a motorcycle in the 80s and Terminator style with the glasses on and a shotgun. He didn't hurt anybody, but he was shooting at demons. Now, was he really shooting at demons? Could he see them? Right? I think there's a fine line between having hallucinations and hearing voices. And if you have somebody, a doctor that really is familiar with this type of illness, there's a lot more hallmark signs to being very ill mentally than, say, just hearing voices. And it makes me so sad when I've heard of people that I didn't know that have shared, say, when they were especially being teenagers, and saying to their parents, I'm hearing voices or I'm seeing something, and end up in a mental hospital, and they aren't mentally ill.
No, but that's the problem, is it? Because, I mean, if you hear voices and these voices are telling you something, for example, what happens to me, sometimes they'll tell me to go somewhere and what they said to me would happens. Or, for example, they'll tell you the future, and when the future comes round and what they told you actually happens. So therefore, you're hearing the voices, and these voices are telling you premonitions or whatever. They're telling you, you know, poetry or philosophy and other kind of stuff. So therefore, that is a genuine thing that happens, and you do hear voices. You know, like, I mean, I think most people suffer from depression. Sometimes, you know, I'd say, without saying I'm a very intelligent man, but the problem is with that is you do go into deep depression at times. You know, that is a bit of a problem.
Well, I think when we get back to the theory of everything is energy too, right? I find a lot of people that are very empathic usually have a high level of anxiety, and they can depression because I think they can actually feel and pick up. I'm not negating what you're going through in any way, Gary, because I can't feel what you're going through. But I also, from knowing to get to know both of you, being friendship, but also very empathic, both of you are. And when we're empathic, like I pick up people's pain all the time. Like when I'm doing a reading, and I will feel what somebody is explaining to me, and I literally have to say in my head, is this mine? No, it is not mine. Return to sender, and I return it with love. Now, with the voices that you explained, I want to, if you're okay with that, I'd like to explain that a little bit for people.
Of course.
So when I say I hear spirit, I don't hear other voices. I think it's individual to the person. And I believe that our guides, our angels, you know, our loved ones, they're going to come through to us in the best way possible, that we will be able to hear it and follow it and not be frightened by it necessarily. And the difference between what you just described, and if anybody is going through this, and I'm not giving medical advice, but if you are hearing something like you just explained, or you're hearing something positive or something that's not going to hurt somebody else nor hurt yourself, and you're comfortable with it, maybe being able to talk with various people and what have you, and work it out. Like, Gary, what you just shared, you're not hurting anybody or yourself, are you?
No. It's very interesting because I think it's important, like for listeners or viewers, to understand that some people actually hear the voice audibly, and other people get the voice in the head. So the voice
mine's
is like
in the head, and it's in my voice. I always say it's within the mind's eye.
Yeah.
And I know it's not quite, it could be my higher self, if you want to call it that. If people don't believe in a higher self, your subconscious, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the way I look at it is, when the voice that's me speaks a little bit differently, but it's always meant in love and either for my highest good or somebody else.
Yeah.
And when I don't follow it, no, I don't blindly say, yes, I obey. That's not how it works. But when, like you say, you get told something in the future or something is suggested, you never told you must do this. It's a suggestion.
Exactly.
And I find that if you do choose to follow, usually works out very beautifully, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I'll tell you, what about a story? This is a very interesting story. Is that when we were driving, we were about to come around a bend. Shona was heavily pregnant. She was heavily pregnant with our daughter Amber, and I could hear the voice saying, "Daddy, slow down." Yeah, and it repeated itself. "Daddy, please slow down." Okay. So I did, and I put my foot on the brake and slowed right down. And as we come round the bend, a car was on the wrong side of the road.
I think you guys shared this with me.
Yes, we did. We did. But I think it's so important because if you think about it, you're sort of then saying that voice that you're getting in mind's eye, if you like, or in the head, had actually come from a child that was unborn. Because if it wasn't for Amber giving it to me as a baby within in the womb, we would well have had an head-on crash, wouldn't we?
And so that's what I'm saying about you followed it. You didn't question it. It wasn't meant like speed up and ram right through somebody. No, that's something you need to see a doctor about.
Yeah.
But it was something saying, "Daddy, be careful, slow down."
Yeah.
And you chose to heed that. And look at what something positive happened in the way of that could have been very tragic. You avoided a head-on collision.
Yeah. But it's interesting what you say about the audible, and we call them thought voice.
Thought voice, yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's a thought voice because it comes in. It's yourself, but it's not your thoughts, is it? It's like the thoughts of an extraneous source. Because, so for example, I mean, you could be thinking about, I don't know, roses, for example, and then all of a sudden you'll get a name James or something like that suddenly come in. So it's something completely different to your train of thought, and that's how you know that actually it's coming from somewhere else.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting as well that I've heard audible voices as well, because in the place that I used to live years ago before I met Gary, we had a spirit in the house, and we had various.
Well, I've heard audible too. I'm just going to add that. But go ahead. Sorry. Yes, that way.
So we had a few things happen, and it mainly it was my mum and myself that seemed to experience this. And we'd hear like footsteps across the gravel drive, and then my dad used to work away, so he would come back very late at night and things. So and we would hear footsteps coming up, and we'd have one of these metal boot scrapers, we'd hear that go, and then the door go, and I think, oh, Dad's home. And I go running to the door, open it, and bearing in mind we live right in the countryside, so not near any neighbours or anything. Open the door, nobody there. This used to happen a lot, and Mum and I had gone out for the evening, and we came back, and I was desperate for the loo. And I rushed upstairs, all the lights were off, and as soon as I got to the top step, I heard a hello. And that was a really, really audible male voice in there. So I was a bit like, but I had to go to the loo, so I had to ignore it.
No, I've heard. Okay, so speaking of that, yes, I can tell you in my previous home, and I have the pictures to prove it. And there are other people that experience the activity besides my family and I. We had how this all started. Speaking of abilities, I was still with my first husband, and we had just watched the movie The Secret. So this is how long ago this happened. And at that time, my back injury was quite profound in the fact that I really couldn't get out of bed that much. But if I could, and before I could, I should say, I had to keep busy. So I love to be creative, you guys know I've talked to you, I make resin pieces and all kinds of stuff. So I was making pet accessories and making jewelry. And I think it was the day after we'd seen the movie. I went out, I was able to get out, and I went to a bunch of local shops. And everywhere I went, I always end up loving and chatting with people, and they'd hear about what I was doing and they'd offer to sell it, but they wouldn't take any commission. So I remember going home, and my first husband won't mind me saying his name. We're still in good terms. And he even signed a release. They didn't put him in the episode, but he signed a release to be on it. So I had said to him, his name was Earl. And I said, Earl, you're not going to believe this. Like, he said, I can't believe all these people want to sell my product, but they don't want any money. They don't want any commission, anything like that. I remember him joking, going, well, maybe it was a secret. I said, I don't know. Maybe it was. So, and at this time, I wasn't aware of my abilities like I am now. So I went to bed that night. This dream is like it happened 10 minutes ago. There was a tree in our front yard at the time, my previous home, and I was outside. And as I look up, there's a man in the tree. And I always say I'm not a high maintenance type of girl. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you could tell that he had a very expensive dark charcoal pinstripe suit, white silk shirt, black silk tie. He had a black goatee and mustache all in one piece, but very neatly trimmed back. He had black hair. It was all slicked back into about ear length, but it was his skin. It was kind of this pasty greenish kind of color. And his eyes, they were big, like probably like big eyes, like mine are bigger, I guess, but they would go from black, completely black, to pure flame. And he goes, hello, Lorilei. And I can't say on radio or on our TV here that what I said to him, but I basically said, who are you? And he said, well, you know that little business that you have? He goes, because he was referring to what had happened in the daytime. He goes, that's nothing. I can agree to give you, he said, I can give you fame, I can give you wealth, I can give you anything beyond your wildest dreams. All you have to do is agree to follow me. And I told him, again, can't say it here what I told him, but in no uncertain terms did I agree, and told this thing to leave. He then told me his name, told me he was a demon, spelt it for me. And again, more emphatically, with more cursy words, I told this thing to leave. And he started laughing at me and mocking me and going, oh, no, 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 no. Every time you see a crow or a raven, you'll know who it is. And I called on Archangel Michael at the time. Can't even describe the colors. Brilliant royal blue, silver, and white flash. I woke up, would have been about 3 a.m. in a complete sweat, shaking and crying. And I am not a crier. I don't even usually remember my dreams to that effect. And all heck indeed did break loose.
Gosh.
I think this happened, though, looking back, I want to add, is looking back, I would always say I wouldn't wish this on a blade of grass, what we went through. Not that I'm any better than a blade of grass. We're all energy, right? But I look back because I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing right now had I not gone through that experience.
Right. I mean, that's kind of what I believe. I think that, things that you go through in life, and, sometimes we go through some pretty horrific things.
Absolutely.
It has to be said. But, they're all there for the experience. And, the idea is that we learn from that and we hopefully progress from those experiences.
We have the choice, right? And all of us have been guilty of saying, I didn't have a choice. No, we have the choice. It's a choice we didn't want to make, right? And it's the same thing when we were talking earlier about people that choose to stay here and not cross over when they leave this life, right? We all have a choice. And we have a choice when we go through bad things. What are we going to do with that? And we have seen some incredible things done by individuals who've gone through horrific things in life. Like maybe they've had laws changed, or maybe they've created foundations or become support people. There's all kinds of things they have done. They've written beautiful music that is very healing. There's all kinds of things. And then we have met people, and I don't say this with any judgment. I always say it's not my job to judge, but we've met people who choose to stay in that victim mentality, and it sort of becomes who they are. And I always feel those people need a lot of love, even if maybe you don't know them, but to send it to them, because I think that's a pretty difficult place to be in, to not be able to sort of step out of it, if you will, eventually.
Yeah.
I'm sure. And if you walked in someone's shoes for a mile, you'd know, wouldn't you?
Exactly.
I mean, every human being on the planet, they have to go through pain and hurt and anger and all kinds of emotions, don't they? I mean, that's what the making of a human being is, isn't it?
And I think also that's the difficult part about being an empath as well. Is the fact that when you see people suffering, you just want to take it away from them, but you can't.
No.
And all you can do is you can be there for them, but you can't take it away, because that's just the stuff that they have to go through. But it is hard.
One of the biggest things, I think I have a lot of empathy, and if I was able to go actively work back again, I think some of the biggest life teachers for me were working in palliative care and end-of-life care. And it's a terrible name that we use over here, and I've heard it around the world. It's called a death doula. But being there to help families and their loved one transition, again, as I call it back home, some people may say heaven, across the veil, wherever your belief system is. And it's such a difficult thing. And I've tried to teach. My youngest has severe autism. So with no disrespect, he's 25. You guys have met him, but he's very much like that precocious 5 to 7 years of age. But my eldest is neurotypical, or, working and on his own now and what have you. But I really tried to teach him, because a lot of us, we've never been taught that when somebody loses somebody, people will say things like, "Oh, I know how you feel." No, you don't know how I feel. And I know they don't mean it from a bad space, but it's just so awkward. They don't know what to say. And then that's the hard part. Plus, when somebody goes through a loss of a loved one, that pain never goes away.
No.
With time, a new type of normal, if you can call it that, grows around it. But I find the most difficult time for a person going through a loss. In the beginning, you're in shock. Family is around, friends are around, people are sending food, people are there. But, I'd say around anywhere from the 3 to the 6 month mark, everybody goes back on with normal life, and it's the way it is, and people forget. And then people tend to feel awkward because you don't want to call the person, because you don't want to make them cry. So you try to avoid talking about it when all the person wants to do is talk about their loved one. So I'm hoping sharing this, even though it may feel awkward, you can say, especially with someone you know well, or friend or family, "I'm not sure best how to help you or support you," or say, they're having a hard time and they're not going out for groceries. Just go pick up some groceries. Like, just do whatever you need to do that you would do. Nobody's going to say no if you went and picked up some groceries, or came over and the person's house is a mess because they're in depression, can't clean the house or whatever. Go over and start washing some, whatever, just to be there sometimes, and people don't think everyone's got to handle all this stuff or how to speak.
No, but it's a difficult thing, I mean, I've had 2 phone calls, and one of them, my best friend, Terry, he was only, I think 45 or something, maybe younger than that, maybe 38, I don't know. He died in a fall. So that was an absolute shock. He was a lifetime friend. And then my another friend, one of my best friends, Ron, I mean, he was 70, I think he was 75, but I loved him dearly. And he had an heart attack and dropped dead in the street on my birthday. And so, and you think to yourself, well, but the interesting thing was that Ron, his wife, I saw her in a vision. That's why I believe in life after death, because I saw the picture. And he went and got the picture, Ron did, and he said, the vision you just had, he said, you just described my wife. And when he showed me the picture, well, that was her. So that was a remarkable experience for me. But it did show me that there was a life after death, but I've no idea in what form it takes. But it does give you comfort that you realize that life does go on, whether it's reincarnation, whether they come back, the souls of the departed come back in a newborn child. Who knows? You don't know.
I believe we never die.
Exactly. Well, you can't, can you? Because if energy never dies, how can you die? If you're energy, you can't, can you?
No, I believe we go on forever. And the other thing, I'm here because I do hear spirit I hear there's going to be somebody out there that's going to be saying, well, you guys claim that you can connect to the other side, that you're intuitive, that you're whatever. And what I'd love to say about that, it's the same thing. Maybe what you do is, I call it jokingly, a muggle job. What you do, say you're working in the spiritual world, but you have to pay the bills. So maybe you work wherever it may be, right? So it's kind of like going to work and leaving work at work and home at home. So when we lose a loved one that's very close to us, that we love more than life, maybe a parent, God forbid, a child, a friend, a relative, it's not the same capacity as when we're working with people, connecting to the other side. I believe like attracts like energy, and especially when we're in a grief state, which is a natural way of being, that is with no judgment. And nobody should ever tell you, if you're hearing this, well, it's been 3 years. Don't you think it's time you moved on? Nobody has that right to tell you. That is your own personal experience. But where I'm going with this as an intuitive, excuse me, is we're grieving. So that lowers our energy or our vibration, and it makes it a lot more difficult to connect to the other side. Plus, it's not in a professional capacity, it's in a personal capacity, and there's a difference.
Well, I'll tell you what was interesting, Lorilei, is that when we went to America, this lady, she flew all the way over. She came from about, 250-mile flight to come and meet me.
How cool.
That I was going to give her a reading, right? Which I was highly privileged. I thought that was marvelous that she actually thought it was worth going all that distance. And anyway, we're sitting there. So I'm giving her a reading. I'm with Shona. I'm giving her a reading, and I was getting all these names, all right? And she couldn't take none of them. She said, no. So I thought myself,
that's hard when you're doing that. I know that's
hard. You've come all this way. And I'm, surely you know these names I'm giving you. You must do, right? Anyway, what basically happens is Shona then intervenes, and you tell her, carry on the story, because it's fascinating, isn't it?
Well, I mean, most of the stuff I get is usually visually. So I was just explaining some of the things I got, and she could take those because I was seeing, I mean, I didn't know anything about this lady. I'll just say that. I knew nothing.
No.
But I was getting basically a red rose on a pillow. And I was describing a box. Well, this wooden box, a very ornate box, apparently her husband had passed, and she had indeed left a red rose on the pillow. She'd also got this very ornate carved box as well. But I got another strange thing. I was getting like a tree. I was seeing this kind of fir tree, and she said, oh yeah, because we went and bought that together. And I also got a thing about a half heart on a locket that I was seeing that really clearly. And she said, oh yeah, she said, well, just, before he passed away, we bought one of those lockets where it has each half that fits together. And he had one and she had one. So he was bringing all those through in the visual things. She could take all that, but she couldn't take the names. But afterwards,
we knew there was going to be an afterwards.
Yeah, when we finished, and her friend, because she was staying around her friends, and Gary said, oh, well, I got all these names, and she said, well, what names did you get? And Gary reeled them off, and her friend said, oh yeah, but that's the dog, and that's your aunt, that's your cousin, that's your
I knew there was going to be an afterwards.
But it was wonderful. It was wonderful because it was like I was thinking to myself, oh, I'm never wrong. I thought I'll never get it wrong. She must know. She must know. It's not going to be wrong. And so I thought, well, she just can't remember, And then Shona came in and saved the day.
Shona opened that little doorway. And what I'm going to add to that.
Because you can't get, you see, the thing is, it's like when the skeptics and that talk about people who are giving readings and that, they say about cold reading. And some people do cold reading where they're trying to pick up on clues, But the point of it is, what I do is I get a message, I give it to them, take it or leave it. That's the message, do what you want with it. And that's what I do. That's it. I give you the message and that's it. And I'm getting Bobby. I don't know. I'm getting Bobby anyway.
What I do, though, and I find this is helpful, and it is hard when you get a name or you get something and the person goes, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then that can be a real confidence zapper sometimes, and you start questioning yourself. So what I get people to do, and I tell them ahead of time, always when I'm doing a paid reading, especially even if I'm because sometimes I will do free readings from time to time on air. It's been infrequent lately. I haven't had as much time, but if there's been times when I'm free and I'll go live on social media and do readings. But I tell them we are all human. We're not all 100% correct. So there may be times, and I also tell them there may be things I may say to you that haven't happened yet. Or you're going to be talking to a friend like this happened, or a family member, and they're going to go, what do you mean you don't know that name? That's so and so, or it's this and this and this, connecting the dots. So I always encourage people, I help them, work with them technologically, if you will, to get them to record the reading, hopefully visually, because sometimes EVP things come through from spirit, from loved ones. You'd be surprised what comes through. And then I encourage them whenever they feel the inkling, because I don't want people sitting and writing, because I'll do that, right? When information comes through, and you too, especially for channeling, you know what it's like. It's you start talking faster and faster and faster and faster. At least I do. I know, and I know a lot of people that do that. So that way they have the record, and I encourage them to go back if they feel that they want to listen, maybe a week later or even a month. Try 6 months from now and a year. And I can't tell you the amount of people that have come back and said, holy cow, I just listened to this, like, and it's a year later, and I cannot believe the stuff that came through that I had no clue about, and now makes so much sense.
Well, it's quite interesting. If you've ever seen a skeptic, right, a well-known skeptic, for example, and they'll come on and they'll come and see someone is giving a reading. So they'll come on and they'll say, look at his cold reading. This is what he's doing. This is how he's doing it, right? Now, that psychic or medium may get 3 fantastic things right and say 70% wrong, right? But the question is, how did he get those 3 things right? It could be so important, whether that's a place, a date, a name.
I don't pay any attention to them because I don't think it's my job to convince them. If you want to be skeptical, you go ahead with your skeptical self. I'm not here for you. I'm here, like I said, if I'm in a bit of a forum or doing free readings and people are there, whoever wants to be here, be here. Same thing I'll tell people, because Dave and I actually, we talked about it, and he wanted to do some readings, and then we talked about it. We figured, so he came up with the title. It's called an predictable reading. So sometime during the 2-hour show on Thursday nights, we will do a reading. Sometimes we'll do more than one. Dave and I both don't like to do mediumship readings on air. We both have agreed we find it takes sometimes a little bit longer to connect with the loved one or whomever may come through. They have the choice not to come through. And then, it's very emotional, and there's a lot of personal stuff that come up. Yeah, exactly. But for example, last night, somebody did ask, and we mentioned we weren't going to do it, but there was information that came through, and Dave gave her the reading, and I gave her a lot more because I kept seeing Mom. She said, did my mom know what I was doing when she passed? And I kept getting the picture, because I'm very visual too, Shona. I kept getting a picture of Mom laying in a coma and being very aware of what was going on. She could hear, she could see. And when we're in that place, right, if you want to call it astral travel, whatever you do, we can leave our body quite freely and see what's going on at that point. And sure enough, she validated that. But anyways, we will do a reading in there. But if we have somebody that's a skeptic or whatever, if they're being really disrespectful and rude, I'll usually give them a warning and say, you're more than welcome to stay, but we're here to support one another and be kind. And if you can't, maybe you need to, you might want to find maybe a different show.
Right. It's difficult, isn't it? Because you look at the people. There are a lot of people are deeply religious people. Yeah. And if they're deeply religious, good luck to them. I mean, I've got no time for religion. I've got to be honest. And good luck to them. I say, But the point of it is, where did, for example, the Bible or whatever, that was supposed to be channeled, wasn't it? It was supposed to be the divine word of God. So that's channeling, isn't it?
Oh, then you get into it. I remember when Del and I were friends, he thought I hated the Bible. I said, I don't hate the Bible. I said, but it's man-made. They're still finding versions. And then you get into who is in power, and they chose and picked what went in there. Like, how do we know? Like, they found some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but maybe there's a lot more people wanted to go in there, but it came from man. It could have been channeled. It could have been. I have heard it has been.
Yeah.
But did it have everything in there? We don't know. There's a lot of contradictions in the Bible, and I'm not
Well,
knocking
that's the problem.
There are, and
Yeah.
there are also some similarities in the writings there to some of the ancient Egyptian writings, and of course, ancient Egypt predated it. So, there are some questions.
That's where I'll leave it. And let's talk about this very quickly. So with the Bible, because I don't want people to think, because that's what Del used to say to me years ago. Now he knows that's not what I mean. When we talk about energy, right? There's a lot of positive and loving and powerful energy, if you will, directed towards the Bible, right? The good book, people know about it. So I'm not knocking it. But same as a Ouija board has a lot of negativity and a lot of negative stories and a lot of negative experiences and energy connected with it. But when you break it all down, it's a tool.
Exactly.
But energy speaks for itself. There's a lot of negative beliefs and then with the Bible, there's a lot of love, a lot of positive. There's sometimes wielded against.
Well, there's many. In fairness, there are many beautiful religious people who they are. There's no question about that. And they totally believe in what they're saying. There's nothing wrong with that. And basically, what you're trying to do is just to say to them, if there is 750 contradictions in that book, you have to sort of question it. And, some people, they say, well, it's the truth. This is the truth. I say, but there's 750 contradictions in it. What is the truth?
Knock people being religious, and I heard it explained. I found this really cool podcast I wasn't looking for. I always say there's no coincidences. My hands were deep in resin, and it's called the Next Level Soul Podcast. And it's a guy that was a Hollywood director, and he has people from some actors and comedians to everyday regular people to channelers to near-death experiencers to you name it. And I actually got a different perspective on things. I always used to say, I don't knock religion. I was raised Roman Catholic, forced to go to church, forced to go to Roman Catholic school. I believe for myself that it's God. I respect everybody's belief systems, even if you believe there isn't a higher power, that's okay. But you know what they said with some of the channeled messages that really resonated was the host Alex asked these people as they were trance channeling, what do you think of religion? And what they said, I thought was so cool. And I have taken it. So I always give credit where credit is due. They had said, whatever brings you closest to either source or God, meaning love, pure love. So that's where I'm going to go with it. If you
I think it's right. It's very, very interesting because, someone once said to me, they were saying to me, oh, you don't believe in religion, but you believe in God, right? I said, yeah, but the point of it is, God to me is that sublime intelligence that runs throughout nature. So of course I believe in God or whatever you want to call it, that sublime intelligence. So that's my take on it, is that there is a sublime intelligence that runs right throughout nature in everything. And also as well, you have to think about it, that all human beings, whether you're gay, straight, whatever you are, you deserve respect
and love,
right? Whatever your beliefs are, you deserve respect, and that is the thing. And I think it's so important to give people the respect, irrespective of what their beliefs are, what they are. It makes no difference. And if
you could all agree to disagree,
for sure,
regardless of what it is, and stand together in humanity, I think this world would be a different place. I really do.
Well, I wonder what the world would be like. Think about this for a while. What would the world be like if we were all believed in sort of the soul, or believed in, love was the main basis of everything? If love was the basis of everything, it would be.
We would have heaven on earth, I think.
Paradise. It would be, wouldn't it? It would be absolutely wonderful.
It would indeed, wouldn't it?
It would.
But it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, going back to your living at the haunted house, what do you think sort of triggered that? Do you think there was a trigger of any kind, or do you think that there was something sort of there already, and because you were sensitive, it triggered it? What do you think?
Okay, I can only give you some theories. Now, I did do a history of the land, history of the house. I will tell you where I live. We have a story that relates. I've told you guys off air about Queen Elizabeth coming here with Prince Philip, and we made international news in 1973. At that time, our name had changed to Thunder Bay, which it still is today. We're on the lakes of, for people listening, one of the Great Lakes, the biggest one, Lake Superior. We're smack dab almost in the middle of Canada. You've got to come through my city if you're going from the east to the west or vice versa in Canada, or you want to get into Southern Ontario in the United States. You have to drive all around the lakes coming through my city, or you can go through the US. The other thing, I'm very close to, actually, it was Del that brought this up with me off air one day. Most Canadians on average live within about 100 miles of the US border. We do. So we are about 35, 40 minutes away from the Minnesota border and about 6.5 hours north of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Now, I tell you all this. We used to be called Fort William and Port Arthur. And we were very much involved. There's so much history with First Nations people and with England, with the Hudson's Bay Company, you name it. So Thunder Bay is notorious for activity. I don't know why. It's not me saying this. There have been people I know that have done paranormal shows, whether it's a First Nations history or what. So getting back to the home, I can't tell you what went on in the land. From what I believe, from what psychics and mediums over the years speaking to them, and from what I felt, there was definitely a lot of bloodshed on the land that I was on. But with that being said, the house was built in 1958. There was 3 successive, very quick owners. And then my ex-husband's family had it. And they had it the whole time while we were married. They sold it to us when my eldest son was 15 months old. We didn't have our second son. We were very happy together in our previous home before we moved to this one. And then when we moved in, it was like he had a personality shift. Like very depressed. I don't know what. He was never the same. I tried everything. I've often said to people, have they ever understood what it's like to live in a house for years and you feel lonely, like you actually do, and you have a spouse and everything? Because he would go to work, and he wasn't a bad man. He's not a bad man at all. But he would come home from work and he'd sit on the couch. And actually, when he would come home, he'd go in the bedroom for a couple hours. He couldn't be around anybody, couldn't talk to anybody. And he'd come and sit on the couch. He didn't want to do anything, didn't want to socialize, didn't want anything to do with it. So I don't know what shifted, because he swears there was nothing going on in that house when they lived there. But when we moved in, there was definitely a change, including it seemed like everything that went on in our life, we had some really bad luck, if you will. There were all kinds of things, including we got divorced. I've often wondered things play out the way they're meant to, but I often wonder if we hadn't moved to that house, if life would have been different between the two of us. Anyways, Del and I were friends. Some of his family were like the second version of the amalgamation of two families. We have the same aunt and uncle through marriage. So his mom was in university getting her nursing degree. She already had it, but she was getting her degree when I was there. Some of his family members were at my first wedding. So we've been friends. Yeah. So it's through marriage. It's not like we're not blood related. So we knew each other. But before Del and I got together, things really started to kind of ramp up in that house. Now, was it I'm going to call it depression, because my first husband actually was diagnosed with severe depression after we eventually broke up. Was it both my boys have abilities, pretty powerful abilities? Was it that? I'm not sure what it was. I have even been told by a very reputable medium years ago, I have the recording. She was just on my show before Christmas, and we talked about this because I never said anything to her. And this is before I was just sort of starting to get to know my own gifts and what have you. And she was having a reading special before Christmas. And I remember she's reading, and I'm in the most active part of my house. And she's saying, yes, the First Nations people knew what land they could live on and what parts of the land they put basically garbage where you did not live. Like that was not a place to live. Your place, the land you're on. And I wasn't rural or anything. I mean, I lived in a middle-class neighborhood. The whole neighborhood seemed to be affected, by the way, too. So she said they know that this land was never meant to be lived on. And then she starts saying, I'm hearing these really strange noises, like kind of sounded like something like from Star Trek or something, like click, click, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm thinking, oh yeah. And then she goes, I'm seeing this crystal. She goes, you have some kind of crystal or something buried. Like I'm talking like 10,000 years ago, really deep in the earth below your house. So, we had the reading and I thanked her and I'm thinking, has this girl lost her mind? Like, what is she talking about? And then I heard, and I now know it's my guys. I thought, no, if this girl gave me the lottery numbers tomorrow, I would go out and buy my ticket. I would. So I don't know what it was. Like if it was
maybe a combination of things.
I don't know. It opened my eyes because I never ever looked at UFOs or ET. I do have some missing time. I've told you guys off the air about this, like blinking and an hour and a half, and I'm in my car's in the opposite direction and I'm miles away and my phone's ringing. I was only supposed to be gone 2 minutes. I've never found out what happened. I'm not saying I was abducted, but I don't know how the heck I ended up there.
Isn't it? Well, it's a difficult thing, isn't it? When you talk about the alien things, is that there's I don't know, in the I think it was the 70s, there were a lot of things where cows were reported to have been
I see the pictures.
Laser things and all kinds of stuff.
Mutilations,
yeah, and and then later you find out that in hospitals they're doing these new laser treatments. So I don't know. I'd love to see some concrete evidence of some sort of alien thing. I have no idea if it exists or not, but we keep open mind.
It opened my mind to it. Okay, I'm not saying it exists or it doesn't, but I will tell you, like we laughed about it when she was on my show because I never had said to her, I thought you lost your mind, because I did. And again, I'm not saying I was abducted. I'm just saying I literally blinked. I've lived here my whole city, and an hour and a half was gone. My phone was ringing, and it was Dal going, where are you? You were only supposed to, and he never tracks down where I am, but I was supposed to be gone 2 minutes to the store. Like he thought I had gotten in an accident or something. And people are going to hear this and probably think I'm like wackadoo. And
well,
that's
there's a lot of unexplainable things.
It seems to happen to quite a few people. So obviously something's going on.
Something's happening, isn't it? But we don't know what it is, but it is unexplainable. Yeah.
Well, the same thing I realize, because my mind works so much faster than my mouth, and I talk a lot. I realize this, but we were talking about voices, Shona, you were saying in that home. So where we went, that whole story. Okay, so this entity that identified itself presented, I do have pictures of it. It looks like a black smoke. Then we had what was like a female shapeshifter. So yeah, I like hearing my boys calling me. Our bedroom was in the basement. Upstairs, I knew my boys weren't home. I thought, like, did my eldest get home or something? Nobody's home. It would say horrible curse words, like terrible things. And each other, never mimicked Dell's voice, but before my boys' voices had changed, boys' voices are higher before going through puberty. It would sound like each one of us. Then the boys, the one with autism couldn't tell us so much of anything, but my eldest never could sleep in the back bedroom ever. We eventually moved out of that room and had a mattress by our bed while we were married and with my first husband. Afterwards, Dell and I had the bedroom in the basement. So he just moved into his father and I's old bedroom. He could not go in that back bedroom. Anyways, so we had these two entities, but my eldest and Dell could see this thing. And there's a video game called Super Mario back in the day. And it looked like the Grim Reaper wearing a black hood with a robe, very, very tiny, with like a white hockey mask is the character in the video game. Yeah. It looks like kind of a Jason hockey mask. Well, they would call this thing the Shy Guy. I have a picture of it. I caught it. Everything in our house was broken. I had like 13, 14 tires on my van gone. No reason. Security cameras wouldn't record anymore. You name it. Things went. Batteries drained. Like, scratches, burns, bites. So anyways, the reason I mention all that, on the security camera, it no longer recorded. They could not figure out why. There was no reason for it. They tried everything. So I have a picture off of our security camera of something at the front, right in the front yard. You can see it. There's a car parked. It looks like it's right in front of it. So I think it was Dell. I said, keep watching that. I ran upstairs and took a picture. There's nothing. You can see it. And I'm trying to think, was that the last? We had 4 different main entities, but you could hear voices, you could hear things, you could smell things that were horrific.
Yeah, you had a demonic voice thing, didn't you? I mean,
I've heard quite a lot of things, but the old house that we lived in, it was an old gatehouse. I mean, that was quite an old village, and I had some really quite disturbing dreams and visions and things. And in the end, we had a couple of medium friends actually come round and never mentioned this to them at all. And both of them picked up on this negative man. And I had things happen to me which really kind of strange as well, because I'm okay with spiders now. I've kind of, I'm not too bad. But at the
peace with them now.
I have, but at the time I was really scared of them. And what do you think happened to me when I went to bed at night?
Took advantage of it to terrorize you.
Plot right in front, not at Gary, but on me. And that's kind of the things that they do, because they get a kick out of scaring people. So
it feeds them too.
It does. Okay. It feeds them.
Fear, anger, sadness, depression, all lower vibrational emotions. And they will do whatever to feed. They need that energy to feed them, to keep alive.
Exactly. So you
not alive. That's the wrong word. Active.
Now, Gary, we'd gone to bed one night, and Gary, you were sort of doing some channeling and things, and this, whatever it was, came through, and that was quite disturbing. And it kept saying to me, I hate you. So I turned to it and I said, I love you.
Good.
And I love you. And
it went,
it just completely just went.
But that's what I like. My son that has the autism, and I have 2 of my most popular videos, and I don't have a big YouTube channel. I basically use it as a show backup, but I have some teaching on there, and I think it's so incredibly important. First of all, we need to be grounded as individuals, all of us. You got a real stressful job, get outside in nature. You've heard people hugging trees, but believe it or not, there's a lot of energy in that root system. We are meant to be grounded, and that will very much help. The other thing is, if you are empathic, I've heard so many people that identify as being an empath, and they call it a curse. I can't go into a crowd. I can't go into a grocery. I can't go anywhere where there's a lot of people. So the videos that I have, I say they take longer to explain than this does to do. It literally takes 15 to 30 seconds once you do it. But I walk you through in each video. I think it's the grounding one. I have a guided meditation I've done too. But I get you to walk through it and create the love shield, because I think love is one of the most powerful emotions we have. And that way you don't finish the video and go, what did she say in step 5 again? So my youngest, how I taught him, there's a reason, there's always a roundabout way why I was explaining this. My youngest, I was able to teach. He calls it the bubble. He still puts the bubble up. But to be able to teach him that when you're angry, because he could see what was going, he could see things, he knew what was there. And I have a feeling there were things that happened with him that he couldn't verbalize. But one night he was very, very angry. And he was calling it Bad Justin coming up. So, and he knew about what was going on with activity. So I had to explain to him, he only eats 6 foods, never had a vegetable in his life. So I said, you know how you can't ever look at broccoli, smell it, anything? He goes, yes. I said, when you think about how you feel about mommy or your brother, your daddy, Dal, and you love them, that is like broccoli to these spirits here. But when you get angry, and he only eats chicken nuggets and fries. Terrible, I know, but that's who he is. I said, that is like chicken nuggets and French fries to them. So sounds crazy, But when you feel like maybe there's something around you, or you feel like it's making you angry, you have to send them how you feel about mommy and your dad and love. And just exactly what you just said, Shona. You said, I love you. And you sent them love, and boom, gone.
Yes, that's right.
Exactly.
I like the old love shield. I like that. We're going to build a love shield in the house.
There's nothing to fear. Fear is a lower vibration. So let's not go out into the world and think that it's a curse, right? Because I look at it as a superpower, and not from a place of ego, but we know when people are lying to us. We know
it's something that we all have, but of course, as we grow up and when we start off, as children, this is all natural to us, and of course, as we go along our adult life, we're told that, oh, don't be so silly, it's nonsense, and they're just, get rid of these invisible friends that you've got, and
I always tell parents, they're having paranormal activity, first thing I ask them, do you have any pets or do you have any children? How old are your children? And especially if they're talking about an imaginary friend, I say to them, find out everything you can about that imaginary friend, because I truly believe to the depths of my core that young children, all of them, can see spirit, can interact with it.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll share quickly for people that don't believe. Okay, there's somebody I do enjoy watching their videos. It's called Nukes, Nukes, top 5 on YouTube. He does not tell you what to believe, but people send in all kinds of videos of what they've captured on camera. And his tagline is it all an elaborate hoax? You decide. This latest video, he actually has 10 top ghost videos. And again, it's on YouTube. There are 2 videos of children that see something there. They're about toddler age, maybe 2, 2.5. How about, if you don't believe it, maybe take a peek yourself and see what you think.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Interesting. Well, I know myself with our daughter that when she was very small, my mum had passed, unfortunately, and my daughter definitely saw something by the door, and it was adult height, and whatever was there must have disappeared back behind the door, because she looked round to see where it had gone, but she was smiling and looking, and I think, that I'm pretty certain that was my mum.
Well, that's the thing about children, and when they're babies, all they know is love, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's
their
the
work
parent
is play. Their work is play. They live in the now, just like animals. They live in the now.
Exactly. And then as they grow, they get all the things from the parents or whatever, and turn into bad individuals, whatever. But when they start out, in love, don't they?
Well, I think it's interesting, isn't it? And going on to the near-death experiences again, I must share that there's a lovely lady I'm friends with on Facebook called Mary, and we were talking about this the other day. And she had an experience where she'd been studying, and I think she was just completely exhausted from studying. She was going to bed and she felt really peculiar, so she rushed to the bathroom, and then she felt like she was going to black out, so she called for her husband, and she basically did black out, and she felt herself in blackness but just floating. And she said that she sensed that there was a presence there, although she couldn't see a figure, but she sensed it. And she said that this figure basically asked her and said, can you see the light? And she said she could. And he said, well, move up towards the light. And she said, well, how? And he said, well, just think about yourself moving towards the light, and then you will. And of course she did. She found herself moving nearer and nearer to the light. And she said that in her experience, when she got there, she said it was really so bright, it was difficult to look at. And she said it was like everything was snow white. And she obviously had some sort of things said to her by this presence, and she heard another female presence actually call her name, say, Mary, pleased to see you. But then she heard someone say, my God, help me, help me. And she said, oh, I've got to go. I have to go back. I'll be back in a minute. And this person, she said, this person needs my help. Now, apparently this male presence said to her, Mary, if you go, you won't be able to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, but I have to go and help this person. So she said, how do I go back? And he said, well, you have to go back, the way that you came. And so she did. And then she woke up and she was in a room, and there was a man crying and two children who she didn't recognize at first. And she said she was freezing cold. And then after about 5 minutes, her memory then came back, and this was obviously her husband and children, and the ambulance came and took her to hospital. So, that to me sounds like a classic near-death experience.
Well, what I'll say to you is how I started all this was when I went into nursing. There's a journal, and I'm going to be 58 in August. This is how long ago this was.
Oh, you don't look it. Wow.
I'm going to be. And thank you, though. So what happened was the journal would come with whatever year it was. And I remember it was 1984. This was August. It was the September issue. I was just going into university for nursing, and I'd ordered this nursing journal. On the front of the cover, one of the things it said is, why are we always eating our young? And it was talking about senior nurses not having the patience to mentor younger nurses. And I've always remembered that. I always took students, always loved teaching, no matter what it is. Then the other one was nurses' near-death experiences with patients, what they saw, and so on and so forth. And it touched me so deeply. I remember going to the hairdresser. This is how long ago this was. I went to the hairdresser, getting my hair done about a week later, and I was telling her about it. And she goes, oh, yes. And this was not talked about the way it was like in the 80s, right? Like it was kind of a taboo subject, depending on who you talk to. And there was a book written by Betty Eadie called Enter into the Light. Profound experience. And that's kind of what started things. I have had patients that have had cardiac arrests that I've been so deeply honored, especially on nights they're awake, they can't sleep. I've got my work done, and, going on rounds and seeing somebody awake and sitting down and talking with them, and them sharing their experience of what they experienced while their heart was stopped. So I can tell you what people try to debunk is they say that this light, this tunnel that supposedly is the norm, which I don't believe is the norm, by the way, but and it does, if it happens to someone, that's your experience. Okay. But what I'm saying, I don't think it's the norm. Yeah. And, a lot of people, like I say, go through this light. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here as I'm thinking. So a lot of people will say they experience that, but that's not been what I have seen. Like, there's been all kinds of experiences. A lot of people will talk about, they'll look down, maybe they had a horrific accident or something, and they're looking down on, some people realize they're dead, some people don't. They're like, oh, that poor person, that's my body. And then recognizing how to navigate the world, like you said, they ask, like, what do I do? How do I get there? Like, and then you realize it's kind of a learning experience. But what I want to add to with near-death experiences is how your friend Mary said she sensed a presence, right? That's why I said, I think at some time during the show here, that we have guides, we have angels, and whether you believe in them or not, they're here with you when you take your first breath and before, until you are ready to transition back home. Yeah. Again, you're never, ever, ever alone. You have a whole team with you here. Now, why do some people have near-death experiences? One that's really profound that I can think of, and I don't know if you've heard of this story, with Dr. Eben Alexander, staunch atheist, neurosurgeon, all business, like no sense of humor, anything to that effect. He, I guess, contracted meningitis after operating on somebody and had a near-death experience with a coma and the whole bit. He now no longer works as a neurosurgeon. He has been saying, oh my goodness, was I wrong? Speaks about his experience, talks about the whole thing. And the more you look into this for people that don't believe it, and I've had a few people on my show as well talking. Barbara Kazi Bartolome, she is the head, I think it's the San Diego International Association for Near Death. What is it? It's an S. I forget what it is. It's IONS. She has come on. She has an incredible story. So I don't think there is any typical. You will hear the medical profession try to say that the neurochemicals, and this is why people see.
Yeah.
But what about the love that people talk about, the music, the colors? There aren't words to explain in our language the profound.
Exactly. Well, it's really interesting because I wouldn't class. I had an experience before I met Gary, but I wouldn't class it as a near-death experience exactly because I didn't die.
I've met people. I want to stop you there just for 1 sec. I have met people though that have had very similar near-death experience, but haven't actually died. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I wanted to tell you that to validate that for you.
Thank you. Well, what happened was I was actually with my then boyfriend at his house in London, and I'd gone to sleep. And I suddenly found myself in this place. And I would qualify this by saying this wasn't a dream because dreams have a different quality to them. This was like being there. And it was so real. And I found myself in this beautiful, it was like a garden. I just was there. I found myself in this beautiful garden. The colours were so vivid. It was really light, lots of light. And it just had the most immense feeling of peace and beauty in this place that I can't even describe. And I was aware of people being there, but I couldn't see them. And then I was back and I woke up again, and it affected me so much I cried because it was such a beautiful feeling and I wanted to go back. It really was beautiful, and I've never forgotten that. And I'm sure there's probably people out saying, "Oh, it's just a dream," whatever. But it was different. It was very different.
But there's been many cases where people have been on the operating table and they've seen the operation being carried out, haven't they? From above. Yeah. So I mean, they were able to describe all the people there, what tools they were using, where part of the body they were working on. So. I mean,
I've met people though, Shona, like even the dream I just shared with you when I first was introduced to one of the entities from our home. And I did validate everything this entity told me years later. I could not find it right after. It was years later trying to help somebody else that I found the exact spelling, the exact name, the animal form, you name it. I found it. And it wasn't like, I love what you just said there. It wasn't a typical dream. That's why I said it's an experience. It's an experience you never forget. The other thing is, I have met quite a few people, and thank you for sharing that experience, because people think you need to have a near-death experience to kind of have the experience you have. Doesn't happen often, but I have met people over the years. It's not a near-death experience, but they've been over in heaven. I had one person in particular. She's had all kinds of unusual, strange stuff, but has been validated over the years, just getting to know her and speak to her. On my old network, I used to do a Monday through Friday night show. I had her on with another individual. I can't say whether it's true or not. I always think the truth will rise to the surface eventually. He claims he was an angel before. I will tell you, these two didn't know each other. They were finishing each other's sentences about what they had experienced and seen in heaven. Now, has she had a classical near-death experience? No, but she had one. She's been to the other side.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's really also the other thing that I find very interesting is I'm not saying all people that have had NDEs have this, but many of them then appear to have really heightened awareness, and psychic abilities and healing abilities afterwards, which is quite interesting.
I see it almost every single time. Like David, my co-host, he looks different. He is completely different. We've even had many conversations off air. I believe we've had a few on my show about, was he what we might call a walk-in? Still doesn't know and has let go of that thought. Doesn't matter. But he looks physically different. he's different. He used to drink, he used to smoke, he used to use drugs. He was about 70 or 80 pounds heavier. He wanted to be a comedian. He played in a band, and he always had these abilities. But when he came back, like, his abilities are amplified times a gazillion. And I find this with most people. Yes, you are right.
Which is really interesting, because it kind of touches on the show that we were doing last week as well, because sort of looking at some of the writers and things, and they dabbled in taking various opiates and things in order to experience something else, the other realm, if you like, because it would give them this inspiration. But what's also interesting is that actually, when you look back, and if people wish to go and do some research on this, this is what used to happen in the mystery schools. And in the mystery schools, they would take whether it be plant or a drink of some kind, or mushrooms or whatever, they would take these to experience what we would call a near-death experience, because of course it then opens up another realm to them, doesn't it?
Yeah, but people are doing that now. Like, look at the ayahuasca trend, and look at DMT. And now I know that under various clinical settings, I know we got to stop soon here, we're getting winding down, but I was going to say that under various clinical settings, they are looking at microdosing of hallucinogenics and drugs like that, and they are finding that they are clearing so much trauma, anything that's happened in childhood or PTSD under a clinical setting with a doctor, a psychiatrist, and what have you, that would take years to clear after 1 or 2 sessions. So there's something to this. Again, going back in history, there is something dangerous, but there's something to it.
Sure. And I think also you would find that even back in history, there would be people with these initiates and experiences to make sure that everything was done correctly and safely. So that's what I'm saying, basically.
They wouldn't be here to tell right after what happened.
Don't do it at home on your own, for goodness sake.
But that's what interests me, though. You think all the greatest writers, poets, and philosophers and everything, right? Everyone reads their book, reads their work.
Yeah.
And if they was to delve right into it, like William Blake and Shelley and Keats and all these things, and Rudyard Kipling of the Jungle Book and all these others, if they were to go more deeper into it, and Shakespeare and many others, they would then realise that they were tapping into something from outside, this extraneous source. They were getting inspiration, whether it was by some LSD or drug or whatever it was.
And again, if you look at everything as being energy, it's the energy is on different frequencies and vibrations,
Or the quantum field. We have the universal consciousness with a quantum field. They've proven this with monkeys on one island. They've seen it repeated, where monkeys are isolated from any other monkeys in the world, and all of a sudden they start using something as a tool that's never been seen before, and the whole colony of monkeys starts doing it, and all of a sudden it's never been observed. We've got people, researching, monitoring, looking at these different things of, groups of monkeys. All of a sudden these monkeys are all starting to do it. Like, how did you guys figure this out? Like, you didn't all figure out at once. So is there something to this? The quantum and the universal consciousness, digging in there and connecting.
Well, it's sort of like having a spiritual internet, if you like, isn't it?
I like that. Yeah.
We can just, tap into it. But of course, again, it's learning how to do it. And I think, to me, Tesla said this, he believed that the brain was a receiver. And I think it is like that. It's very much like a radio, in the fact that you're tuning in. There are different wavelengths, that you can tune into to tap into these things. And I think probably if anybody's listening to think, well, I'd quite like to do that, but without going on to drugs and things, because I wouldn't advocate that.
No drugs.
You don't have to.
No, and it can prove quite toxic to the body as well. So, to be very wary of that. But, to do it, you can do that without any of that. You can do that simply by meditation. Meditation is a fantastic tool. Absolutely. And it's also very helpful as well with things like depression and anxiety and other things as well. if you do your meditation regularly, you know, this helps to train your brain to be quiet. And interestingly, this is exactly what happened to Gary with his abilities, although he didn't go through that. Spirit just did that to him. So he's very lucky in that.
But I think also what's very important, and this is the interesting thing, is that science believes that when body dies, brain dies, mind dies.
That's where I was going with the tunnel
yeah,
in the lake.
But channeling proves that body dies, brain dies, but mind continues.
I agree. Yeah.
And that is the most important piece of science news we brought out tonight.
That's why I brought up Dr. Eben Alexander, because he was quite a notorious. I hadn't heard of him before, but apparently he was well known as a neuroscience surgeon over in the United States. And for him to come out and say, "Holy cow, was I wrong?"
Well, that's quite something, and it's good, isn't it, that he's actually admitted it, because there aren't that many in the medical profession that would necessarily admit that. And it's just to sort of quickly finish on an interesting note, was that my mum, I was actually staying with Gary in his house in London, and I got a really bad feeling came over me about my mum, and I said to Gary, "I've got a really bad feeling, there's something wrong." Gary said, "You have to get your mum to the doctor as soon as possible." So I rang my mum and I said, "I'm going to come home, but you've got to go to the doctor, mum." And she said, "Well, why?"
I feel perfectly fine.
Exactly. And I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, "But both Gary and I feel that you need to go to the doctor." Anyway, cut a long story short, I managed to persuade mum to go. And we went there, and the doctor, he said to my mum, he said, "Well, why are you here then?" And my mum said, "Well, I don't really know."
My daughter said I have to.
Anyway, so we explained the story, and he was just sitting there going, as if to say, "You're completely nuts." Anyway, he said, "Well, okay." He said, I'll just give you a quick checkup." Well, he checked up my mum's leg, and my mum's leg was swollen, and she had a blood clot.
Oh my goodness.
And he said, "We're going to fast track you to hospital." And of course she was treated for it and everything else. But he said to me afterwards, he said, "Well, you were quite right." And he admitted it, which was something for him, because he was the type of doctor that he
won't forget this experience. I can tell you that.
If she'd not gone, she would have, would have been it. But it was amazing how, like spirit or whatever you want to call it, can give you these bits of information, and you need to act on them, and that's it. And whether it's right or wrong, you should always listen to your gut feeling.
One thing I'll add on a sort of an ending note is what I always share with people is, regardless of what you receive, whether you think it's from spirit or what, or people will ask me, like after watching the Love Shield or the Grounding and Gritting video.
I love that, the Love Shield.
Yeah, they'll go, "Can I do this with it? And can I do that with that? And can I do this with it?" And this is what I share that I've received from spirit, is if it's meant for your highest good or for somebody else's, and it's meant only in love, there are no right or wrong answers. If you've thought it up and it feels right, do it. You don't need me to tell you that's okay, or anybody else. As long as you're not going to hurt anybody or anybody else, and you're meaning it in love and for their highest good or your own, go for it.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we are all individuals. That's the point, isn't it? All individuals.
Wait, after me, we're all individuals.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, my darling. Well,
it's been wonderful having you on here.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's always a delight to talk to you.
Yeah, we love you dearly. We love you dearly.
I feel the same way, and I'm so grateful that you guys had me on. I'm going to be having you guys back on my show again too, because my audience just loved you.
That'd be wonderful. Yeah, that'd be
wonderful. Really lovely, definitely, because there's always so much to chat about.
I know. That's I told you before the show. I said this is just going to fly by, knowing us.
Bless you, my darling. Well, thank you for joining us on The Allens Investigate tonight. And you can check us out at www.theallensinvestigate.com and on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network 105.3 and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. And also find us on Roku. And you'll also find the beautiful Lorilei on Roku as well.
Yeah, do check her out. Do check her
That's
out.
a place to get a hold of me, actually, is on facebook.com/The Angel Rock. You can find my groups on there, whatever. Send me messages. And again, thank you so deeply for having me on. I had such a great time.
Lorilei. It's been an absolute pleasure, darling. Absolute pleasure.
Lots of love, my darling.
You too. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you on Monday here.
Thank you guys for watching. Take care. Bye.